Your pace, our protection. At Howden, we understand tech startups and scale-ups need insurance that moves with them. From launch to exit, we cover it all, adapting to your growth. No limits, no boundaries, just people-first insurance built for innovators like you. Howden, with you every step of the way.
Welcome to the Cambridge Tech Podcast, talking all things technology from the heart of the UK's tech capital. Here are your hosts, Faye Holland and James Parton.
I'm Faye.
And I'm James. So let's kick things off with asking how your week has been, Faye.
Well, my week last week was eye-wateringly busy, as usual. The big event I went to was the Chamber of Commerce, CAMS B2B. And I actually found myself, I did the opening or one of the opening addresses, and I found myself quoting both Innovate Cambridge numbers and David Cleaveley. So I'm becoming like this Cambridge Tech Podcast Cambridge machine, I think.
You're a walking version of the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I did last week on Friday was I posted a video. It is hilarious, right? It's 13 minutes and 28 seconds long, so it's quite long. However, it's a UUNet customer services video. So it's telling people 5 years ago how to use the internet. It's hilarious. We even give people instructions on fax us if you've got any questions.
I love it. Can we put the link in the show notes to that then?
Yeah, sure. And I have 2 appearances on there, right? One of them, I think everyone just wouldn't recognise me. And the second one, I look like a 16-year-old wearing a 40-year-old suit. It's the most bizarre thing, but it was of the time for sure. But I mean, the content's hilarious. So it was, hang on a minute, I'm saying it's hilarious. It was a moment in time. You know, it was reflective of the start of the internet, and to be there was just so cool. But yeah, you've got to watch it.
I've got something similar, actually. I've got the, when BT Cellnet, if you remember BT Cellnet, prior to 02, we made a video describing all the amazing things that 3G would bring to our lives. Yeah. And actually, most of it is still, you know, the use cases are correct, but the devices that people are using in the video are just hilarious. Yeah. So maybe we can both post our links up and people can...
Yeah, you find yours. Mine is already out in the ether now, so thanks to Stephen Howes, who dug it out of his attic. But there you go. And what about you?
Well, these little look backs into history are quite relevant for today's episode, but we'll come on to that in a second. Yeah, my week, busy. I know how much you loved me talking about the Trinity Peripheral Prize. It was that our final workshop has been delivered.
Okay, good.
So apart from going on about the closing date, which is the end of this month, you won't be hearing too much more about that. I went to IE Cambridge Expo, which was really well attended, and lots of listeners to the podcast there, which was nice to catch up with a few people. And also there's a new tech meetup coming to the Bradfield, the ACCU meetup. So another coding-based meetup, which is always nice. So check them out on meetup.com.
That's great. Good. So should we get on with the news then? Okay, so first up is a people piece of news. Arm have appointed Charlotte Eaton as Chief People Officer with immediate effect. She's going to lead the Arm People organisation and report to CEO Rennie Haas. Charlotte is actually rejoining Arm. She was previously Vice President of People supporting teams in the Intellectual Property Group from 2017 to 2020.
Cambridge Climate Technology Pathfinder Levidian has formed a new partnership to drive forward decarbonisation projects across the Middle East with Canoe Energy. The companies will jointly explore and execute projects in the UEA, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain and Oman. Canoe will also work with Levidian's dedicated engineering, procurement and construction partners within the region.
AIM-quoted UK company Filtronic, which works with SpaceX, is opening a new engineering design centre on Cambridge Science Park. Filtronic designs and makes products and subsystems for the aerospace, defence, telecoms infrastructure and space markets. It says the Cambridge location positions Filtronic in one of the UK's most dynamic technology clusters and reinforces the company's commitment to advancing its expertise in space and defence communications.
Raspberry Pi and Italian company Seco have signed a strategic partnership ahead of the Compute Module 5 product launch. The alliance will see Seco bring to market a new human-machine interface solution based on CM5.
Parkwalk Advisors, in collaboration with Cambridge Enterprise, has launched the University of Cambridge Enterprise Fund number 10. It's the 10th in a series dedicated to investing in the UK's most promising and industry-changing early-stage science and technology startups born from Cambridge's world-class research. Managed by Parkwalk Advisors, the fund offers investors the opportunity to support breakthrough companies commercialising pioneering discoveries from the University of Cambridge, backed by significant benefits of the EIS. For more than a decade, Cambridge Enterprise funds led by Parkwalk have invested in more than 100 cutting-edge businesses that are redefining industries, and these include Cambridge GaN Devices, Cytora, Paragraph, Foremost, Psyomics and Riverlane. So some of the backed companies have seen some substantial exits, the press release said, from the $28 million acquisition of Fluso in 2022 to the $383 million acquisition of Horizon Discovery.
You did well there. That was a long one, wasn't it?
It was.
Google and other global big hitters have joined Cambridge Steered Sherry Alliance, CIC, on its official launch. The initiative is designed to combat cybersecurity threats at a hardware level, and more details can be found on the Business Weekly newsfeed. Founding members include global commercial research and open source organisations and several UK university and government entities.
And the last piece of news is from Cambridge's Echion Technologies, who has made further progress into a multi-billion-dollar global battery market as their partner CBMM unveiled the world's largest niobium anode production facility dedicated to producing Echion's XNO technology. The new plant, located in Brazil, is capable of producing 2,000 tonnes per year of XNO, equivalent to 1 gigawatt hours of lithium-ion cells. The facility enables Echion to mass-produce XNO at scale to meet worldwide demand for the product, and the plant was formally opened at a ribbon-cutting ceremony attended by CBMM, Echion and its customers, government representatives and senior leaderships from both companies.
Lovely, and now on to today's episode. We are joined again by Jamie and Tony Quested from Business Weekly.
So sitting across from us today, we have Tony Quested and Jamie Quested from Business Weekly. Hello, lovely to see you both. You have had an extremely busy, you're always busy, but it seems to have gone completely bonkers recently. So the original invitation was to get you on to talk about the awards, but actually there's much more than that I'd like us to go through, if that's okay with you.
You're both across everything that's happening in the city. So I guess a two-part question. If you look where the money's going, obviously quantum, semiconductors, AI are all really hot at the moment. From everything that you're seeing, the conversations that you're having, how do you feel Cambridge is positioned to be at the forefront of those, leading areas? And maybe the second part of the question is, those areas are getting a lot of attention, but is anything else really important slipping under the radar that listeners should be aware of?
When we opened our doors in 1990, there was no biotechnology cluster in Cambridge. There were 2 or 3 companies who were blazing a lone trail at the time, and now look at it, multi-billion industry. The eyes of America, Japan and China and Europe, to a large extent, are on the life science cluster in Cambridge. We don't see that abating anytime soon. You can't avoid the fact that American companies are the ones who've got the big bucks and have got a radar screen somewhere where they're looking at what's going on in Cambridge, what's going on at the university and externally throughout the cluster. And it's no coincidence that they're the ones who are putting in the multi-billion acquisitions for our companies. Within life sciences, we're seeing more from genomics. That's not just led by Wellcome. It's led by a lot of companies, one of which is American, Alto Labs, one of which is Shift Biosciences in Cambridge, run by Daniel Ives, whose father, Steve Ives, used to do fabulous work in the computing sector. who are working on anti-aging technologies, endeavouring to come up with technologies that don't kill people from cancer while they're introducing them, which is one of Shift's great strengths in my view. So you're seeing a massive rise in genomics as well. Not just Sanger, but there are now more companies working in genomics than ever before in this region. Synthetic biology has taken off. I don't think there's a better exponent of the broader cell therapy science than a company such as BitBio, which has ClockBio and has other subsidiaries. And when we were talking to them in the build-up to the final judging of the awards, it became obvious that their reach was global, that what we see on the surface is only a small minority of the activity of the company. We're also seeing a better quality of CEO. I mean, Mark Cotter at BitBio and, for example, Michael Chen at Nuclera, two of the best execs I've seen in my 30 years with the business in that sector. So Cambridge has, because of the university, let's not kid ourselves, the Americans are putting the money in here because the companies are spinning out of the university or they're being started up by ex-grads. It's the brain power that the Americans are buying into. So when we started, an American company would come in, buy a company like Cambridge Cable, for example, with Comcast, UNet, who snapped up Unipalm. They would come in, they would take the technology and they clear off across the Atlantic, never to be seen again. These days, the Americans are smarter, cuter, they've got the money, they'll buy the Cambridge business, but they'll leave it in Cambridge. And a very good example is Featurespace. It's just been acquired by Visa, deal still going through. But Visa have been here to the science park, they've seen the headquarters, they know what makes Featurespace tick, and our information is that they'll leave Featurespace here. IQGeo will be left here to grow with guidance from America after their sale to KKR, which went through, took them private last week. Darktrace will be the same. A little more confusing picture because Poppy Gustafsson, the CEO, walked out to take up a government post as one of the ministers for investment. But basically, the Americans are now leaving the companies parked here, and then they can still cash in on the graduate talent that comes out from the 8 world-leading universities in the cluster we cover, the east of England, particularly Cambridge. So I don't think Cambridge has missed a beat in terms of the technologies it's been able to identify and how it's grown them. It has got itself into a pickle in terms of how to grow the companies. We get calls from chief execs saying our VC wants us to take on an inordinate amount of staff over the next year, and we're telling them quality, not quantity. You won't get this. We've worked out that Samsung, ARM, Qualcomm, all the other companies that have crept in to Cambridge under the cover of darkness from America in semiconductors and whatever, Samsung coming in, all the engineering companies, they want between them about 100,000 engineers, which is why ARM has opened up in Bristol, which is why you're now seeing the law firms, the big law firms like Burkitt's, following them down to Bristol, setting up in Bristol. And the companies know they can't get all the engineering talent they need from Cambridge. So you'll see this diversification across the country, across Europe, to bring the talent in, which is sensible to us because you couldn't ever describe Cambridge to Bristol as a corridor. But at the same time, intellectually, it is a corridor. And that's why I think we've got to educate Cambridge companies more to say, look, what you should be doing is taking it more slowly as you grow. If you've got good customers in Japan, then use those to get other customers in Japan. Doesn't always need to be a wild thrash for cash. Take your time. People you bring in, don't go for quantity, go for quality. And if you have to share engineers on work that isn't confrontational or conflicting, then share them. You don't always have to take the Apple route of putting panels between every team member. You can actually get people in working on projects that can be coordinated quite comfortably. It needs a change of thinking, a change of management, but it will come.
I mean, I think that's really interesting, Tony. So we've been talking to Catherine Chapman at Innovate Cambridge. There's going to be a tech strategy developed, and they're the kinds of modes of thinking that I think we need, because, you know, sharing resources, create a centre of excellence, but diversify. We can't just think of you build it, you scale it, you sell it. You know, we're going to have to start being a lot more creative to retain that leading position.
The problem is that Cambridge University is so collegiate. You have the major colleges who've all got shareholders who like to invest in things that are outside of Cambridge geographically, outside what you would regard as a remit of a university college. They have their own interests. They will look after the shareholders so they keep the flow of money. And, you know, when we talk about building a new Silicon Valley of the UK in Cambridge and 250,000 homes, something like 75% of the city is owned by the Cambridge colleges. So, you know, would you mind getting off this land, please, so we can widen the motorway or widen the A road in Cambridge's case? And the answer is no. You've got to be realistic. Those colleges will look after themselves. I've visited a number of them in recent months, and the philosophies of each college is totally different. Their philosophy towards business is different. Good luck to the university if it feels that it can layer across all of those colleges some kind of common thesis that says, okay, we're all going to work in the same direction. I don't think that's likely to happen. The other point is you can't enforce graduates, PhDs that are coming out of the colleges. You can do it with university departments, Department of Engineering or Cavendish or whatever, but you're going across colleges, some real talent there. And to get them all to work to a university agenda when they might hail from China and only have one thing in mind, that's to build a company and take it back home as soon as they can, and America and Taiwan. It's happening all the time. You know, it's very difficult. The university faces a very, very difficult job. It's a powerhouse. It's a creator for the economy of finance and jobs. But at the same time, the colleges, if you talk to them, have different agendas and different ways in which they want to encourage their graduates and their PhDs to build whatever businesses they come across. The other argument, of course, is should that be the driving agenda of any college or any university? Should it just be, it's a very healthy, economically beneficial side benefit? They're there to be educated, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a whole, a whole added complexity, isn't it, into the Cambridge system. One we're probably not going to tackle right now. So, but if anyone would like to join in, please come and join us.
I was going to say, it kind of prompts the question, we should maybe get someone in from the colleges. We speak to the university a lot,
but
the colleges.
But that in itself is part of Tony's point, isn't it? You know, the University of Cambridge, of course it exists, but it's made up by all of those different colleges. So, you know, you're working across all of those different agendas. So I do think that things like what Caroline's doing, what Innovate with IE, with Innovate Cambridge, you know, they're trying to bring programs together, but my goodness, they've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. You would get a different perspective, for example, if you spoke as part of that initiative to someone like Dorothy Byrne at Murray Edwards, who has nothing like the budget that the kings of this world have, and how they manage, how you achieve your strategies, your aims, your hopes for a woman-only college, because there's huge debate which we're grappling with at the moment, which builds into the awards in a way of why women are not being given more responsibility in business. We had an emailed letter, a very nice emailed note from one of the winning companies at the awards in September, a woman director, saying that she noticed that, you know, when people were being announced as prize winners, it was invariably the men who were going up on the stage. And we pointed out that there were 3 women chief execs sitting around the tables who pushed their staff up to get the awards. But it opened up a much wider debate across Cambridge. I must admit, I was in there with my 2 penneth stirring that debate.
I think we both stoked the same fire. that week. I know I certainly put out a LinkedIn post going, look, actually, you have to step up.
Yeah.
You know, you have to give other people opportunities. That's absolutely fair. But, you know, I think it is definitely going to be and should continue being an ongoing discussion. You both are complete allies of women entrepreneurs. You've run awards for them for probably the longest than anyone else has, and continue to do so. But let's move the conversation on, if we may, and what I would like to talk. So kind of still a little bit coming from universities. You chaired, Tony, a session at Cambridge Tech Week on entrepreneurs, where you were talking obviously to people that are within the university that start businesses. So first of all, let's just level set and ask you to do a proper description of what is a entrepreneur and why did you want to host that session?
Entrepreneur is a don that builds and spins out businesses. So they're university professors, often heads of department or very senior in a department, that spots talent among their students, which they seek to encourage. If they have a genuine interest in building a business, then they will take a role. So we had Florian Adrea, who's now built 6 companies, I think, including one financed from China, and Andy Hopper, who co-founded his first company back in 1978. And he was working with Acorn, and he spun out his company. And he's now working on a company that's had investment from Cambridge Angels, which has had an intellectual input from Patrick Vallance, and is being looked upon as a business model for the future. It's a company called Low Risk. Cambridge Angels have invested. First investment it's made in America. It's got American and British arms, and is basically creating what I would call, through sheer ignorance no doubt, a Wikipedia of high tech. So no one's going to be making Elon Musk-style billions. The other entrepreneur on the panel was Steve Young, who sold companies to Google, Microsoft, and Apple. Not necessarily in that order. I think Microsoft was the first, actually. He sold Entropic to Microsoft. Most recently sold Vocal IQ to Apple as an answer to Siri. And they're in different positions, because Andy, or while we call him a dontrepreneur, he is a don and he is an entrepreneur, but he has license from the university to follow his own agenda. So a dontrepreneur is someone who's had the sense to recognise, and there aren't that many across the UK, let alone in Cambridge. And one of the debates that came up when we were putting this panel together was that, where are the women dontrepreneurs? And we looked in Cambridge, and people were mixing up professors who were growing companies with women who could be described as a serial entrepreneur. You know, people like Sherry Kutu, who's a fantastic entrepreneur, one of the best we've ever produced of either gender, of any gender, I should say, in these days. But the aim was to show that within the university in Cambridge, there were professors who recognised that they had a wider role, and had they not stepped in, or were they not to step in, would there be a good business proposition that would just wither on the vine? That's why those 3 got involved, not necessarily to make money, and I say that knowing all 3 very well, not necessarily to make money, but because they realised there was an opportunity and they were best placed to develop and encourage it.
When you think about how many universities, both nationally and globally, look towards Cambridge for inspiration on how to improve entrepreneurship and, you know, spinning out of IP, etc., what were the key insights from that panel?
The panel is quite critical as to how heavily the university gets involved in what they get involved in. We knew the situation, and a couple of weeks before the panel, I interviewed Terry Willey in America. She was the first director of Cambridge Enterprise. And when she arrived here from the States, we just had Alison Richard, recruited from Yale University, who became the head of the university. And the difference in how the university was driven was chalk and cheese. She was really entrepreneurial, and she encouraged all the departments to open up on what they were doing in terms of commercialising their technology. Terry came in, there was no funding, or very little funding for business within the university. and very little in the way of an entrepreneur's panel or a body of brains that could help those companies and steer them to commercial success. Terry started the process, Tony Raven then picked it up. But one of the questions we asked was what percentage of students across the university were aware of Cambridge Enterprise and what it could do for them. And the answer there was quite embarrassing. It's improved immensely in recent years, but at that time it wasn't. So again, like the life science community, within the last 20 years, we've seen the university become far more commercially minded and aware of the talent, the business talent that it's got within its halls. But that's been a fairly recent phenomenon. Now, after the entrepreneur session at Cambridge Tech Week, I was approached by 3 PhDs who didn't work together, who said that was really fascinating, but we'd be really interested to know what the position was throughout the university. People who didn't necessarily have someone inspirational like Steve Young or Andy Hopper or Florian Odrea in charge of their department. Where do we go? How aware are our departments? How aware are the professors? How aware are other students? Can you put on an event which may or may not be, it's certainly on my agenda to do that next year, an event for the whole university to widen up for selected representatives to say, look, what you're seeing is successful, but is it as successful as it could be or should be? So that's the key takeaway for me, that if the students are asking that question, there's got to be a marketplace for at least a discussion and then perhaps to take it on a bit further.
So to bring the conversation back around again to, how Business Weekly adds, the additional impact, research is obviously a big area that you guys focus on. You recently published the Catchy Brain Gain report, which is really interesting. So this was looking at money raised by Cambridge technology and life science companies that have roots in academia or institutional research. Jamie, do you want to tell us more about that research?
Anything that's come out of the University of Cambridge, like the Wellcome Sanger, the LMB, and we were just looking at funding, how much they'd raised over the year. Out of the total fundraising across the last 12 months, it's something like over 70% was raised by companies with these institutional links. I think the figure was 1.6 billion, I think.
Right.
Which is quite impressive. That's across, obviously, life science and technology companies.
And you're covering the whole East of England region as well
as
just
Cambridge.
Right?
It was purely Cambridge. That's just Cambridge, that figure, yeah.
People tend to regard Cambridge as a kind of exemplar, so we are widening that. We've engaged with Stevenage Bioscience Catalyst. We work with all the other universities, Essex, Herts, Norfolk, Suffolk, Milton Keynes, Bedford, Cranfield we do a lot with because they're involved in a lot of areas like aviation, aerospace, which link into big companies like Marshall. Therefore, we try and link the brain power with the industry to provide exemplars to help haul people up the ladder, if you like, to inspire other entrepreneurs to do that. And Jamie came up with a superb idea for an aerospace confab, which we're about to give birth to as well, about sustainable aviation, which would feed into another of the key issues in terms of the climate change debate and how much we're doing and how much is paying lip service to it and how much is actually working towards net zero, which is a shame to say, probably very precious little.
So the Brain Gain report, was this like a point-in-time piece of research? Is this something you're going to kind of evolve and keep moving forward?
We'll keep doing it every year now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So out of that 1.65 billion, actually there were 2 or 3 companies that took the lion's share of that. Who were they?
There was Bicycle Therapeutics, Quantinuum and Raspberry Pi, which accounts, obviously the Bicycle was a post-IPO equity raise of $555 million. Raspberry Pi raised, I think, $225 million from their float, and then Quantinuum's $300 million raise, which came, I think, Quantinuum's was mainly from the States.
Yeah.
That funding
has now got a valuation of $600 billion. It's made us aware at director level that there is a press release in the pipeline that will show that they're valued at 10 billion after a further 600 million raise. So they've grown within, a couple of months. And quantum computing, to pick up on James's earlier point, quantum computing through Quantinuum, through New Quantum, through many other organisations that have since contacted us in the last few weeks alone, quantum computing is a massive area in which Cambridge has taken a world lead as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Riverlane, New Quantum were also on that list as well, weren't they, Jamie? I mean, it really is kind of the Rolodex of up-and-coming technology companies. Echelon Technologies is there, Cytogenetics.
Yeah, there's about 30 companies that are with institutional links that have raised money in the last 12 months.
It must be challenging to pull this data together because there's a lot of undisclosed deals. Are you doing your sleuthing behind the scenes to try and figure this all out?
Well, obviously that doesn't include the undisclosed amounts.
Right.
We couldn't obviously get those figures, but some of the other companies that were of interest, I mean, the life science ones like T Therapeutics, Constructive Bio, Quotient, they're all very young companies, but they've raised good amounts of money. Like T Therapeutics, 59 million, Constructive Bio, 58 million in both Series A raises. Quotient was, I think, the launch funding, 50 million, but that was from the States, that money.
Let's come on to the States funding in a moment. So you released the brain gain figures, which is coming out of the university, but you also have just released the broader marketplace figures as well.
Yeah, for all Cambridge life science and technology companies over the last 12 months. So that figure was 2.3 billion, which is very healthy. Life sciences accounted to 1.3 billion of that, with tech companies just under the billion.
Which, Jamie, that's really interesting because when we spoke to Catherine Chapman, she was saying that, life sciences gets a lot of the emphasis at the moment and tech, still important, but to lesser so. But actually, they're not that far apart.
There wasn't in these findings that I felt they were very, very close, obviously boosted by Quantinuum, Raspberry Pi. But we also looked at the breakdown from where the companies were based, like Cambridge Science Park, Granta Park, Babraham, Chesterford. And between Babraham and the Science Park, I think about 50% of them, 50% of the funding went to companies based at Cambridge Science Park or Babraham.
Wow,
that's money.
That's pretty impressive for those two facilities,
shows
isn't it?
radar at work again,
Yeah.
or the investment companies' radar at work again. They know exactly where the growers are based. Their intelligence networks are second to none. They're just picking them off.
So let's talk about that because we've seen so many acquisitions now or investments from US companies. Tell us what you're seeing.
The Americans have got most money, so that's why it's no coincidence that starting with Abcam last December being swallowed by Danaher Corporation. I remember just after we opened our doors, Danaher was trying to hoover up every inkjet printing company in Cambridge, including Domino, Lynx, Elmjet, Cambridge and the east of England. Domino stood alone for a large number of years before taking Japanese money, fairly modest Japanese investment from Brother Industries. But the Americans have got the big bucks and they're combing the globe for what they need. We used to run a scheme with the government called Tech Ops, which was technology opportunities. And I had a call from a guy in Microsoft in Seattle who said that he'd been looking for 7 years for one component to finish off a product that's going to make Microsoft billions. And he found it through our Tech Ops, and he found it in India, which shows that if companies need something, they're going to scour the planet. So their intelligence tentacles are reaching out across the planet. But in terms of finance, the finance is held within America, within China, within Japan to a lesser degree. So it's no surprise that they're going to come in like Danaher did and say, OK, Abcam's vulnerable, they're squabbling. There's a split among directors and former directors as to where they should take the company. So they come in with an offer that the shareholders couldn't really refuse. And that started the ball rolling. And the same has now happened with several other Cambridge companies, not just in life sciences, but in high tech. I mean, IQGeo is very much in the high-tech frame, as is Darktrace with cybersecurity. I've had one or two like Endomag, Go, Life Science. So they're looking at everything. I mean, we've been approached by, I got a call from Cornell University saying, could they advertise their MBA program in Business Weekly online? And which gave us quite a dilemma as we work with Cambridge Judge on their MBA program, and they're a sponsor of the awards and are in the process of broadening their interests and their activities. So we're talking to them about that. So we've had to be very diplomatic, but we are aware of a number of American universities who are hurling scholarships at not just our PhDs, not just our graduates, but they're targeting the sixth form children of our entrepreneurial CEOs. And these are, we'll put you down for the basketball team. Well, I've never played basketball in my life, but that doesn't matter. And you get a $120,000 scholarship per year. This is what's happening. You're seeing it to a lesser extent from other countries like Canada and whatever, who've got very good programs and very good cases for liaison with Cambridge companies. But the Americans have overwhelmingly got the money. And while you've got a political agenda that's militating against the Chinese, for example, then America's going to predominate.
So, a regular topic of conversation on the podcast is the challenge of scaling businesses in Cambridge across lots of different vectors, talent, space, etc., funding. If, as you said, Tony, that increasingly the US investors are keeping the presence in Cambridge and building and investing into Cambridge, should we be focusing on starting and exiting, or do you think it's for the long-term health of the UK economy, we really should be trying to figure out, the recipe to successfully scaling without exiting, too early?
It boils down to individual desire. You're a Cambridge PhD, you've got an idea for a business. You might spin it out, you might not. You might curate it for a while and then take it back home. But say you spin it out of the university, you're going to seek funding. You've hopefully done a business plan and you project how much you need, how many people you need, where you're going to get them from. I would be so bold as to say that lack of strategic planning is the biggest fault that we've seen for the last 35 years, come next May, in businesses growing from Cambridge. They can have big ideas about where they want to go, and they see these startling market figures. X market is worth 30 billion and Y market is worth this. And they say, well, I wouldn't mind a slice of that. But you and I can't get into the minds of those individual entrepreneurs to see whether they want to sell out as soon as they've made a few bob, or whether they are genuinely interested in building a business that can stand the test of time, having been gated in Cambridge, stayed in Cambridge, grown from Cambridge, and likely to continue growing. And I would quote here, and he won't mind me doing so, Phil O'Donovan, who was chief exec of CSR, Cambridge Silicon Radio. When Qualcomm came calling with their billions, Phil was one of 8 people, only 8 shareholders, who said, no, we don't want to sell and we shouldn't sell because they're undervaluing the company. He is now chairman of another one of our former awards winners from a couple of years ago, and he is telling them to go down the same route. He's advising them, to go down the same route. But you've only got to have a chief exec of a young business who has to raise money to get where they want to go before that investor imposes their own sanctions, their own conditions. Bear in mind, most of the investment funds around here that would invest in our businesses are heading up syndicates who are representing individual investors from around the globe who all have different priorities. Why are they investing in that particular fund? Why do they invest in Amadeus Capital Partners? Why do they invest in CIC? Why do they invest in Parkwalk? Shareholders are only interested in one thing: their shares grow and they make money. You can't get into every single shareholder of every single investment fund in every single investment in Cambridge businesses to find out what each of those individual shareholders wants to achieve from their input. And that is one of the dilemmas, and that is one of the things we are seeing behind the scenes big time at the moment, this conflict between where the VCs principally want to take those companies and how that conflicts or dovetails, usually conflicts with the ambitions of the entrepreneurs who set up and started out with that business. Huge disconnect.
Yeah, the alignment between the founders and the investors is critical. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, a huge conversation just on its own. Maybe that's another round table that you should be working on. So, or maybe even are planning to work on. So I want to lead us now into the business awards. And actually, it's kind of a cute segue in that you think about, we've just been talking about all of these large companies being acquired. So the IQGeos, Featurespace, Darktrace, Abcam, Satavia. They're all previous award winners. So, you know, I wonder if everyone who's on your awards list are all the prime top.
List, right?
It is the shopping list.
Jane did a very interesting exercise and enlisted my few brain cells that were left on our Hall of Fame, companies who won Business of the Year. And I think there were only 2 that hadn't been sold. We're heading towards 100 billion that those companies have raised. And when you go back to 1990, you realise the fees that they were being paid. I mean, Pi Research, which was our first winner, was sold to Ford, who then sold up to Visteon. And I think the total money raised was about 50 million. You roll on to a company like Cambridge Anti-Technology in the midst of that cycle, who were bought by AstraZeneca, 500 odd million, 600 odd million. But you look at those figures and they don't seem so big, and they're certainly not going to match what companies are paying for. Darktrace, who is a former winner of our award, Abcam, which is a former winner of our award, they've gone recently for billions. And companies that have won categories in our awards have been sold or are being sold or will be sold. That's not why they enter the awards. I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying that if you enter the awards, you're going to guarantee yourself a pot of gold. But it is it has proved an incredibly successful route for companies who've got long-term global ambitions. CSR is the only company I know that didn't want to sell. All the rest did.
Yeah,
I think it's also a credit to the process that the judges go through for the awards. You know, there's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes. I've been involved in a couple of years of that, and it's a detailed process, isn't it? It's not an accident that you are very accurately predicting who's going to be the next big thing.
Mills and Reeve do a lot of the work throughout the year with the judging, going out interviewing companies. So a lot of the groundwork's done then, and then the panel of judges on the day, it's quite a big panel.
Yeah.
So they bring their own qualities.
It's pretty brutal as well. You know, they don't get along to come and talk to the judges and pitch. And
that's not the only strand, though.
No, I know.
What people don't see is what the judging that goes on throughout a year. As soon as a company is entered, it's not just Mills and Reeve going out and interviewing them. We're putting out strong vibes to those companies that we need to see continued progress. If they start going back, it's the same with our Killer 50 Awards. If they start going back, then there's a reason for that. So we are judging this throughout the year and on different ways. We also have an unofficial network of serial entrepreneurs with whom I consult as issues develop throughout the process involving companies. We had a short list of 52. You have to draw the line somewhere, but I can honestly say that every one of those on the final shortlist were judged properly and adequately. And the things that they thought, which is another problem in any awards, to be fair to any awards organizer, where a company thinks is strong isn't necessarily where it is actually strong, or how an investor or a future employee, which is another important part of the process. You know, you want to hire. Why should I get out of bed in the morning to come and work for you? It's not just the wage, that's just a part of it. What interesting work are you doing? We go through all of that. So when we get to a point where we're sitting sponsors down, we don't let them away with any misconceptions about where that company may think it's strong and where we know it's strong.
Yeah.
And where we think we had, keep to anonymity here, but we had companies who were revealing things that I don't think they'd even told their shareholders, and going into markets which we have warned them since they shouldn't go into unless they've investigated it more thoroughly than just snatching at a passing opportunity. The other encumbrance is that we are aware of things that even the companies don't know we're aware of. For example, fundraisings, where we are aware that they are in the process because an investor has probably had an engagement with us. Since our awards were announced, we knew about the IQGeo one. Luminance has opened up in Dallas. They're already in New York. 2 of the late Mike Lynch's companies have now been sold to America. A third, could Luminance be a third? I dangle that out there. I wouldn't bet against it. Nuclera has raised $75 million. A lot of our companies have grown through investment since winning the awards, not because they've won the awards, that's just an endorsement of what they do. BitBio has just won a massive patent case which could tap it into a market that would be worth, at a conservative estimate, $30 billion. It's not an accident the way we pick the awards. We have the criteria that if a company stands up on stage and collects an award, we don't want them collapsing within a year. It can happen through the argument between where an investor wants to take the company and where the CEO wants to take the company. And that we'll see more of that, I think, in the coming weeks.
That's great insights into the whole background of the awards. And obviously we'll put the link to all of the award winners. You mentioned some of them, but we can put the link into the show notes. I'd like to close with us just having a quick conversation about what will be the 35th year of the awards next year. So what are your plans for that? What are the key deadlines? Will there be a Winner of Winners award going back over all those 34 previous winners?
The date for the awards is September the 15th at Queen's. I have a surprise speaker lined up.
Which already booked.
Who is it?
Some surprise. Where are you from?
I'm going to try.
We won't tell anyone.
The event will start earlier, I'll tell you that. No, we're not going to go into plans. There's too many other awards up and down the UK where we're not going to release too much too soon. But the date is a given. The venue is a given. The speaker will soon be a given. The programme is being broadened and discussed, taking on board feedback from previous years. And indeed, there may well be a Champion of Champions award
how exciting.
Drawn from our Hall of Fame, which is pretty impressive, I have to say.
Good luck to the judges with that one.
If it comes down to the judges.
Oh.
No, it will be judged, but a lot of the companies who won original awards have been sold, and therefore you have to follow the lineage through. It's quite complicated. So it's not just, well, they've won it twice and they've won it twice and they've won it twice, but no one's ever won 3 awards. But next year might be an exception.
Right, well, that's something to watch. And generally, people really should head over to businessweekly.co.uk to find out much more about all the different things that we've discussed today. So thank you very much, Tony, Jamie, for being with us.
Thank you.
Today's show was produced by Joe Donaghy of Cambridge TV and supported by our media partner Business Weekly. The Cambridge Tech Podcast is available on all major podcast platforms and on cambridgetechpodcast.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. It'll really help others discover the show.